Welcome to Power Talks. In today's special episode, we are discussing about Nepal's peace process, constitution drafting and elections. You are in Nepal at this historic phase. We are writing our constitution after Nepal becoming a republic. What do you suggest that we should not miss out in the new constitution so that we prevent any future conflict from happening, the one like we suffered from for almost a decade?
I mean, there are many wise people in the Constituent Assembly, and I think Nepal has got some of the best brains in the world. So, I mean, I don't think it's for outsiders to say what needs to be done.
Since you have the experience of working in several conflict countries.
Certainly from our point of view, one of the important things, I mean, first of all, I think it's really important that there needs to be a political resolution to the challenges which Nepal is facing today, and the parties have to come together and find a solution to the current difficulties that have come up in the last few months, because our hope was that once we have a new government placed, the new Constituent Assembly, the new Parliament, the nation can focus now on meeting the needs of the poor and of the masses and the Millennium Development Goals. But the time is passing and we're still dealing with all of these political uncertainties. So, I mean, either we say that while we resolve these issues, we still have a very sharp focus on the goals and on the needs of basic rights of people. So, in the Constitution, which is a question you asked me, I think the basic Millennium Development Goal type issues, water, health, education, livelihoods, these should not be based on the whims and fancies of the elected government of the time. These need to be enshrined in the Constitution as fundamental rights, as has been done in South Africa, as has been done in many other countries. If economic, social, cultural rights are enshrined as fundamental rights, as fundamental as civil and political rights, then that this is a constitution which belongs to the majority of the Nepali population and not just the few people who control the power. Because even though we've seen all these changes, there is a real nervousness that basically it's the same actors. They've now put on new hats and new labels, and we have to go beyond that and take it to the ordinary people, to the poorest citizens in this country.
Current 2011 census, which is happening right now, could be also one of the very important component, as this census is expected to bring a lot of unseen components in the population of the country and a lot of issues and data that was not in the past, because a lot has changed in last 10 years.
Right.
And how are you looking at incorporating this upcoming new data into the electoral system? Election
Commission particularly create its own database for the voters, because this is our mandate. This is mandatory for the Election Commission to create its own database for election, particularly of voters. That we are doing now. Regarding the census data is taken for delineating constituency. Census is taken in every 10 years. It's a decennial, right? And without census data, the delineation cannot take place. Delineating constituency for election. I think Election Commission or the Commission for Delineating Constituency will be using data of the result of the census, and on the basis of the data of the census, the constituency will be delineated and we will be conducting election in those constituencies. Apart from that, the results of the statistics or Central Bureau of Statistics, the population census, will not be so much in use in the electoral process, except comparing the age group and the looking at it. But then one sensitive issue you raise with regard to the population census is, from last 15 years, I should say now, we are more sensitized. We are more sensitized ethnically,
yes,
and linguistically, geographically. So the results of the census certainly will reflect the results of the people who are so sensitized. So it will definitely demand, and the people will demand the right of being represented in the government systems with the proper electoral systems in proportional way, which may be a right of the people of this country. But I am not dealing these questions from the election commission side. Normally, people do not understand when elections are over, work is over, and election commission will be waiting for the day of the announcement of next election. That is not true. There is a cycle of election preparation. We have a pre-election, we have elections, we have post-election. So these three periods are cyclically running, moving around. So after the Constituent Assembly election that we have had in 2008, we started evaluating ourselves from outside, from our stakeholder side, from a national stakeholder as well as from international observers and our development partners, I should say. And we found that we need to bring reforms in many aspects, including electoral roll and new electoral roll preparation, including reforming in the electoral laws that we have used in the Constituent Assembly elections, and also some other capacity building of the election commission's staffs for managing election better than we managed previous elections from 1990. I have seen elections in this country. I have been in this field for the last 21 years in Nepal.
You've seen it all.
I have seen all, and I have been involved very deeply in the election process. So next elections, as I mentioned earlier, we have talked about, it's going to be much more competitive. And the suggestions and recommendations and feedback we received from you and from all is being incorporated, and we are now preparing one of the four fundamental elements, that is the first elements, that is voters. Without voters, election cannot happen. And voters need to be identified, voters need to be met. Each voter need to be met. We are trying to meet each and every Nepali voters.
That's going on right now.
Yeah, right now we're doing that.
We have 28 political parties in the Constituent Assembly right now, and in the last few years we have 78 political parties registered with your office, the Election Commission. Isn't it too many parties for you to deal with and your office to deal with, and also even for the voters to get confused in the next election with 78 different political parties to choose from?
Every election, before every election, we invite a political party to register for contesting election. That is the standard norms. Before every election, we invite them to register. So last elections, we invited political party to register to contest the Constituent Assembly election. We registered 74 political parties. Then in the election, only 54 contested,
Okay.
and 25 of them were represented in the Constituent Assembly. Because of the split in the Constituent Assembly or outside of Assembly, we have increased the representation of the party in the Constituent Assembly by 4 already. And that makes the total number of political parties in this country 78. I think in a couple of days' time, we will be having one more party registered in the Election Commission, which will make 79. You are correct. The more the political parties, the greater is the problem in managing the political party, not only political parties, because we have to provide resources, we have to make sure that the people understand what political party is, who is doing what, and what is the political party all about, and who should they select or elect for, and all these things. Not only that, the resource will be used, more resource will be required to manage, and we do not manage political party entirely, but then we are also custodian to see whether political parties are behaving according to the norms, according to the laws and orders and law and the code of conduct. So we have to have their records in the Election Commission, and we will have to have their names and their symbols in the electoral ballot paper or whatever things that we are using. So in that sense, the more the political parties, the greater is the cost, and the greater is the complexity for the people to understand it is a problem. But then new and growing democracy, it is a characteristic of this.
Face this kind of problem.
Problem, yes. And also one thing I like to mention here, the electoral system also sometimes encouraged to have more political parties or sometime the electoral system, if the other electoral system is there, then parties would like to merge together and become one, then being many, that is there. So depending upon what electoral system we are going to use, that also contributes in proliferation of political parties, or combining or joining together or making few number of political parties.
It's a nice concept. It's a beautiful concept that we involve the people to take care of the security, because it's their vote. It's a great privilege that they can choose their own leader.
Right.
Now, how do we prepare them? How do we make them aware, given we have very strong cultural norms, we have high level of illiteracy, and not to mention the remote constituencies we have in the country. So what are the challenges and opportunities, and how do you plan to prepare them?
I think this is a continuous process. As you have mentioned, that we are a country not only difficult from geographically, we are difficult from literacy wise, and also we have to manage a complicated electoral system which has to be understood by the people, by the voters, by the political parties. So Election Commission has a policy of continuously conducting voters' education and civic education. We ourselves cannot do everything. We have been choosing partners or working together with the civil society and also international development partners to work in the area of voters' education. You mentioned that ours is a very much mixed society, and we are still in very much primitive stage in some part of the country, and religiously we are sometimes fundamentalist. Yes. And religiously.
Where women are given less space.
That's right. And some women cannot even address their husband's name and cannot call their husband with their name.
Which is mandatory when they go to voting.
Yeah, and that is required for them to tell to our people when we are taking photographs or registering them. This is also still there. So there are a lot of challenges. Illiteracy is one of the biggest challenges. And
which is going to take a long time to
and
solve.
It is not overnight, kind of speed or overnight completion or success issue. It will take a long time. And we have 75 district offices. We have a strategy of creating voters' education materials in all languages spoken, mostly spoken like 17, 18 languages. And we use the materials, and we use all the electronic media, FM and community radios and all these things. And we also prepare posters and pamphlets and all visible portrait, and so that people can understand what is going on. And for the voting purpose, for voter registration, we have to do one type of education. And when it comes to the voting, it comes to the electoral system, then we have to change that education materials and work for the education, countrywide education again. So we have been doing that with the deployment of thousands of our employees in the village. Even we are sending, during the time of election, we send women and men appear together to each house to tell the people what they need to do, where they need to go, and how they should be casting their votes. But then we don't say who they should cast vote.
That's for them to decide.
Yeah.
The trend in Nepal is such that the politicians are short-sighted and the governments are dysfunctional. If this continue to be so for a while, cannot the civilians' initiative trigger that?
Your point is taken, well taken, but thing is that at the end of the day you need government's help in implementing certain things, like laws, like judiciary, because they are the controlling agents. So without that, things will not function. Private sector can come forward, but private sector also needs government, because government is in charge of governance of many things, of everything, basically. So without government, without conducive government or conducive policy and intention, it is very difficult. It does not happen in any country.
In 2008, the common citizens of Nepal were given the rights to elect the current lawmakers into the Constituent Assembly. But right now, the right to extend the timeline of the Constitutional Assembly lies with the same lawmakers. It seems that they are continuously voting themselves in. And if they just continue to keep themselves in the Constitutional Assembly and delay the process, can the Election Commission intervene and announce a new election?
The Election Commission? No. The Election Commission can only hold an election if it's instructed to by the President, and the President can only instruct the Election Commission on the advice of the government and cabinet, if you will. So there's no chance of a kind of unilaterally declared election, no.
So how do we see the end to the Constitution drafting completion if this continues, that the Constitutional Assembly members keep themselves voting in?
Really, your question is how long can this go on for, and we're getting kind of frustrated with the wait, and it's, I think, an understandable sentiment. The Supreme Court very recently made a decision just a couple of days before the expiry of the last extension of the CA that essentially confirmed that the CA has the right to change the Constitution, if you will. That's what their right is, with a 2/3 majority. But it did send a signal also to the CA, this very recent Supreme Court decision, both that that extensions should not be beyond 6 months, in a sense, as an instalment, and two, putting them on notice, the CA members, that extensions without proper justification are not really in keeping with the spirit of the interim constitution, and then thirdly, that any extensions would be under judicial review. So it's putting on notice, if you will, the CA members that they do have that right, but it's a right that needs to be exercised judiciously. I think that was really what we all took away from this Supreme Court decision.
Writing the new constitution could be the beginning of the solution of all these issues that we touched upon. But do you think we will get the new constitution drafted by the end of May?
It looks very bleak the way the things are going right now, because though it has become very cliche to say consensus, we should all get together and reach sort of a compromise. We're saying all this, but that's the only way out, no matter how cliche or mundane it sounds or how repetitive it sounds. That is the only way. It's only through consensus, by compromising on a certain situation, that we're going to have a law of this country. Because, as you know, there are political parties with a political ideology that differs so much from one another. So if they all stick to their own political ideology and do not want to budge an inch, then there is no way that you can have a common constitution that appeals to all spheres of the population. So I feel, and the way things are going right now, I do not see any consensus happening, because it's not only inter-party disturbances that they're having, it's also the intra-party things that they're going through. And no matter how sad or unencouraging it looks, it is the fact that we do not have a leader who is actually thinking about the entire nation and the entire population. They all have their vested interest.
The peace process is stuck over the issue of army integration. And now that UNMIN has left without witnessing the integration of both armies, what is your take on this?
To me, the peace process isn't stuck on this. It's slow on this. But I understand the frustration everyone feels, and I share it. Everybody would like to see this resolved much more quickly. I've been here 14 months, roughly. I think it's about 14 months. But I do know that in the time I've been here, I have seen progress on this issue of the peace process and on the issue of integration. I think the parties have all agreed. They recognize that it does have to happen. It's going to happen. Everybody's accepted that. I personally believe that the Maoists recognize that, yes, if they want to get a constitution, if they want to move forward, they will have to give up their cadre. I believe this. Maybe I'm wrong. I think that may be a painful choice for some in the party, but I think it's something that has to be done. And certainly we all in the international community, I think, would argue that this has to be done. Making those decisions up and sorting through the modalities, the numbers, and all of these questions is a tough issue for many. And I recognize that, but I would say to you that from our perspective, there's a difference between the issues of the Constitution, for example, because those go to the heart of democracy. Those go to defining what kind of nation you're going to be, and you need to fight for your democratic principles. the issue of how you integrate or rehabilitate the Maoists really isn't an issue of principle. It's an issue of, it's a process. Requires negotiation perhaps, but these aren't the issues that you fight and die for. Is it 8,000? Is it 7,000? Is it 9,000? These are numbers. Get it done, move the country forward. Actually, there's probably been more progress since Unmin left than in the 4 years leading up to that. And that's not a reflection on Unmin, but it's just a change in political dynamic. I think there's some challenges there, but I think that they can be managed as well. I think the parties, if they have the political will, this can be done.
America has supported the peace process and constitution drafting of Nepal. Are you equally frustrated, like the common people of Nepal, that we are not achieving as much success in this venture as we had expected?
Yes, we're all frustrated, but I do see progress. And we see the issues on the Constitution have narrowed tremendously. And again, oftentimes these are not so much about the issues per se, but about the politics behind it and the struggle for political power. And we see that happen in many societies. When you think of what Nepal was 50 years ago, closed to the outside world, an absolute monarchy and all the rest, and today the monarchy is gone. You're defining who you will be as a nation, how you will govern yourselves, how you will share power and resources, what you value. These are all tough issues, and you're doing it for your political leadership as well in a context that is totally alien. There's no more monarchy to blame or to support. They're all on their own, and they've all got to figure out how this works. So when you look at it in the broad context, you've done more in 2 decades than many countries have to deal with in 100 years or 150 years.
Various political parties have proposed the Unmin to do the re-verification of the PLA. At the same time, there has been a conflict between the Maoists' leadership and the Nepal army. Now, how will that complicate the army integration issue, which has been lying there for 3 years now?
The issue of the reintegration of the combatants in the Nepal army is something that all party special committee headed by the Prime Minister, that was Prachanda, was looking into. So it was clearly political. When that committee was, hasn't even come out with its recommendation, for them to keep raising this integration issue was a political, game. That is one. But on the question of Unmin, it was the understanding between Nepal government then and the Maoists as rebel forces. They had invited them. So I don't know whether verification is possible or not possible, but Unmin has to convince Nepal army and the general people in Nepal that it was not biased towards the Maoists. We really don't know what are the level of access given to the Nepal army in that joint verification committee. Yes, there were people from the PLA and there were people representatives from the Nepal army also, but we need to know now, what was the level of access or involvement of Nepal army in that verification process. Unmin has also not so far clarified what happened to initially, Maoists gave a list of 31,000 people registered. We really don't know because, what happened to other 8,000 people who were missing between the time of registration and verification. We want to be sure as Nepalese that those 8,000 don't pose any, threat to the future process, and that, they are benignly, not associated with the Maoist activities.
Last year, Constitution Assembly was formed. One of the major factors that triggered to the formation of Constitution Assembly, was to address the issues of Janjatis, Adivasis, marginalized groups like Madhesis and religious minorities. We don't see the Constitution Assembly sessions really focusing on their issues. Rather, it has become a space for the political leaders to find loopholes, to gain more power to themselves. And where do you see a space for the marginalized groups to voice forth their rights, not just from the streets, but through a peaceful and more intellectual way?
Well, that was the very composition of the Constituent Assembly is, yes, there are certain positive elements in terms of composition, in terms of representation of the people who were, left out so far and all that. But, in all this process, we never saw political parties serious. They didn't define the priorities. They haven't even formed the, State Restructuring Commission, which they promised long ago. And even before that happened, the Prime Minister and certain groups signed, like an agreement about what should be a particular, let's say for instance, Madhya state like. That was putting the cart, like before the horse. So you first form the Constituent Assembly, State Restructuring Commission. You get political parties to define their position. You get the opinion of stakeholders and experts. Then, based on the recommendation of such a commission, these things should have been decided and approved after thorough debate in the Constituent Assembly. But so far, the process has not even begun. So it has created very serious doubt whether the Constitution writing would start at all, whether it will be finished within the stipulated, time frame, and whether other issues could be addressed altogether, because the political parties are not serious about it.
Now, how do we accept or how do we explain that the losers of CA elections are given the nominations to rule the nation? The post of Prime Minister, the post of Foreign Minister, and probably there will be new ministers appointed who have lost the CA elections in the past.
In a sense, when you talk of people's mandate, it's almost a joke that people without the mandate have the responsibility. People with the mandate are in the background. On the other hand, people who had the mandate, who had a chance, they also didn't live up to their responsibility. So in a sense, it's just a failure of those who got mandate from the people, and therefore the others got a chance. But it's somewhat ironical and difficult to explain. On the other hand, as citizens, we need to focus on the basic task of constitution forming and good governance in the interim, so that people can lead their normal life and expect better tomorrow based on rule of law, based on a constitution that is widely accepted.
Thank you for being with us. We'll be back next week at the same time with another special episode. Till then, good luck and goodbye.